well, we're trying to make this boat look as good as we can make it look, and that's not the case. When I used to build skiffs, it really didn't matter what they looked like. They were mostly just a working boat. This one's kind of a little yacht, so we want the paint job to come out as nice as we can. And it requires that I actually plane it first before I sand it or do anything, and feel it, and I'll plane it in like 3 directions and everything else, because you never sand it and get it to come out right. So it's going to be sanded in the end, but I'm going to do all the shaping of it right now and get all the seams even and things like that. So, you know, as far as planing it, I can tell you for sure that you have to have a plane that's exceptionally sharp, because otherwise you'll pick up the grain, you know, especially in an area like this, because you don't know when you look at this if this annual ring is on top of this one or not, but you can kind of tell by feeling it. You know, I would tell you that this one is on top of that one, and the idea with that is you have to plane that in that direction. Now over here, if this one works out exactly right, this one's going to be the opposite direction, you know, and you can feel it as a lump right there, because the way it bends and probably the actual thickness of the lumber in these situations is a tiny bit different, even after it comes out of a planer, and especially after it sits around for a number of years. So, you know, like I say, I can feel it right there, and you'll find out that when I plane it, this will be a hole. I won't be able to plane this quite so easy, and this either, and then this will be planing like crazy. And I'm going to do it in like 3 directions. One would be almost straight across like that. The other would be diagonal like that. And the next one is fore and aft. So, you know, let me get started and I'll show you. Oh, you see this? I picked it up, right? So I was wrong. You know, I have to go this way. Now, maybe if I go this way on this end, it'll work out real nice. And that's exactly right. So I was wrong, and that's okay. And in this area, you can go across the grain really easily. And I can go across the grain up here, too. What I can't do on this end is go straight. You know, I can go straight coming this way, but not the other way. So, you know, now I'll be working on the seams as well, trying to get all the black off, because the edge of the plank is just a little bit irregular. So you want to get all that off. Take a swipe under here. Now I'm going to reverse my direction and plane this out right in here, because it's still a lump there. You can still feel it. So let's try this out. I'm not as good left-handed, but that planing a cross grain is what really takes the lump out of it. You'd have a heck of a time getting it out just going back and forth. So, and these are a little bit tricky actually to plane, because a round bilge boat, you know, your plane doesn't really set flat on it, but and it's not flat on here either, but it's going to be in this direction. So, you know, it's a little tricky. You have to keep the plane right down tight. And the plane's different around the curve than it does back aft, where it's flatter. You know, back aft you have more blades sticking out than you do here. Now, you can see those black lines it leaves. That's like aluminum oxide. That's right off the bottom of my plane. So those are like on the hill. Those are on the high spots. So I can see it, never mind feel it. And I can feel it under the plane. Well, now I'm going to reverse direction again and push the plane with my right hand. And you can see that with my right hand, I'm steadier, and I can get quite a bit more work done. The other thing is there's always a direction to lay your plane down on the surface, especially if the boat's got any twist in it. You know, you have to plane or set the plane down in the right direction. That doesn't mean you have to move it in that direction, but you have to set it down in that direction to make contact with the surface, the blade to make contact with the surface. Now it's a little proud right here under the guard, so I'm going to make a swipe or two right there. Yeah, I took care of it just like that. Now this isn't something I would try to do with electric plane, battery powered or corded, because You know, it's too delicate to do that. You know, those planes are very aggressive, and that's mostly the way I use them. I do use them for fitting and finish work, but in this situation right here, this is the one, a number 5. And I like the aluminum because it does deposit some black spots on the hills. You know, a steel one, it doesn't do the same thing, but it's fun to do because it's accomplishing the task quite rapidly. We are prepping the hull up here for paint. That's what we're doing. We're fairing it as good as we can with the plane. We're going to do a little bit of filling, fill the holes, and then we're going to sand it. You know, we'll probably use a rougher grit to go over it very quickly, but when you do that, you can't linger whatsoever because it'll take the soft grain right out of the wood and leave the harder grain. So there's no time to just relax and do a real relaxed job. It just doesn't work that way. You have to work at it. So planing it first and then sanding it, and it'll come out smooth. You can see where I'm planing. You know, I can see where I've planed. I can see where the plane has made contact with the surface and where it hasn't. It changes tone or color a little bit like that. You know, and you can, like I've said before, you can feel it under the plane. You really have to have a sharp plane because this stuff lifts very easily. With any kind of dull equipment, you kind of dig into it and it pulls it up. So I do all that diagonal planing, and then I start planing fore and aft, and you can see, you know, where it hits the surface, you know, where the other plane lines are, and you can just keep changing direction a little bit and smooth it right up. So that's what I'm up to there. Going through knots is something pretty interesting. You know, you see a knot in front of you and you just have to decide, I'm going through it. So you intensify your strength when the blade gets to the knot, and there's no compromise. You're going through. Boy, I'll tell you, a number 5 like this is an amazing tool. You can do so many things with it, but I love the aluminum one. I really do. It's light. It's much easier to use than a steel one, but I've fallen in love with it. I don't even have a steel number 5, you know, or any other steel plane, really. I use a little rabbit plane steel, but not one of these. So I've got a smooth plane, this big aluminum too. You've seen that before. But it's a little bit of work, but I enjoy it. This planing really makes the surface fair. It takes all the bumps out, all that steeple grain, which always is proud, it seems. I can do the whole boat, you know, in probably a half a day, one end to the other on both sides, so. I'm mixing up some TotalFair. This is the stuff right here. You can fair an entire hull with it, or you can do very, very minor imperfections. It's easy to mix. You just mix approximately the same amount of each color, the yellow and the blue, and you mix it together until it's green. You know, we're not having to mix too much of it up because we're just going to fill the screw heads, you know, the holes. It goes off quick, it sands easy the next day. It just does the job. Before I do get started filling the holes with TotalFair, I've got a little brush right here. It's a little acid brush, and the bristles are cut way down short, so that I can reach in that hole and kind of scrub around a little bit and get most of the dust out of there. Now the secret to this filling is to keep moving. You know, you're not going to get from the stern to the bow if you keep hesitating. You try to get enough on your pallets here, you don't have to go mix anymore. All those kinds of little tricks, you know. You kind of learn them as you go. You know, this is learn to fair and learn to paint right here, for you guys and for me. I do use that little hydraulic pressure thing because you want the hole to be filled, overfilled, not underfilled. That way you can sand it down, but if it's underfilled, there's nothing you can do except fill it again next time. It's soft enough so that in soft wood, you don't sand the grain out all the way around it when you're trying to get rid of it. Now, if it was too hard, you might get it down, but when you got it down, there'd be a hole all the way around it. Now, working like this, you never go back to your pallet. What you do is, if you've got excess, just move it up. Even if you're not really dealing with it, trying to make it perfect, you just deposit quite a bit of it in that area right there. So then, when you get a few spots done, then you can make sure they're nice and flat and full like that. And like that. I'm still liable to do a little filling after it's primed because I can go around and find some things that I can't find until it's painted. We're fairing a little bit of the steeple grain right here because it did get a little torn up on one spot right there. Now, I don't know if I tore it up or it was torn up before or what, but, you know, a little bit of filling like this and takes care of it. Sanding's always a little bit of work. I mean, you have to do it. You have to move the machine around. It's not going to do it by itself, so, and you have to hold it down there nice and tight if you expect it to do any work. I've done the fairing with the plane, and I wouldn't try to fair it with the sander, and you know, it's going to come out, the combination of the two tools makes it come out really nice. One thing I am thankful for is my little vacuum device here, because I can sand this whole thing. I can sand the primer, the putty, the wood, and not one speck of dust comes out. So, you know, it is my safety equipment. I don't need a ton of stuff because there's nothing in the air. Now we're going to use a sanding block and get at this stuff we couldn't get with my sander. So, and then at the same time, we're going to sand the bottom of the rail. We'll have to come back and sand that part right there, but the bottom of the rail and this stuff here, all at the same time. Getting started with TotalProtect, first you have to mix up the base, and, you know, and it's got sediment in it. So to be able to mix it up really easily, you just can't really take a stick and start going around in circles. You'll never make it. You have to have like a blunt end stick, and you can kind of squash it with the end of the stick. Once you've done that a lot and going up and down around the sides and everywhere, and I don't want to add the hardener into it right now because what would happen would be I'd use the entire can. So what I have to do is measure out 3 parts of the base and 1 part of the curing agent. So I'm just going to do that right in a little plastic mixing cup. Now we're on the 3-to-1 scale. I'm filling it up to the first 5. Now we're going to add hardener or curing agent and fill it up to the next 5 and stop right there. So now I've got, you know, 3-to-1 by volume in my mixing cup, and I'm just going to mix that together. It's fairly thick stuff, so what I'm going to do is add thinner 200 to it and thin it down a little bit, because otherwise it goes on with too much of a texture. It's like epoxy primer. I love it. Doing a project like this is fun because I've always been a little bit afraid of painting myself. You know, I was never very good at it, but you know, you sit down and think about it really, and you can kind of get organized, and then when you go to do it, it just happens. I'm starting to prime at the transom because I just want to see how it rolls out, you know, and how much it covers and different things like that, and see if there's any problems. But the transom can be worked with really easily and smoothed out later more and more. So, you know, I just started with that, and now I'm going right on to the sides. And we are going to put on multiple coats because I'm going to sand through this quite a bit here and there to get the thing really smooth and get the texture of the first coat off. And then we'll coat it again, maybe 3 times, but it's going to look good when it's done because that's an effort right there. I'm using a foam brush to stay ahead of the rolling, really, because I don't want to go back after I've rolled it and then touch it up under the rail. So I stay ahead of myself with the painting under the rail if I can. A section at a time is the way to go because you get it complete. Usually I do it in like 2-foot sections because that's the easiest for me to keep pressure on the roller, is right in front of myself rather than way off to one side or the other. It doesn't work as well. The rolling on of this primer is not where you really get the idea of how good it is. It's when you sand it and when you roll over it with other coats. That's when you realize it comes out very nicely. You get the grain of it sanded down really easily. A few more coats and it'll look fantastic. I do have a little bit more woodwork to do, but we're getting there now. It's working really, really well. Well, let's see how she looks. Well, it's white all right. And it looks great, it really does. I can't wait to strip some of the blue tape and see what that looks like, but I'm pretty excited to have a coat of paint on it now. It's starting to look like a boat now. You know, the contrast between the bottom, the red and the white, and the gunnels will just be great. You know, it kind of gets me going. I hope it gets everybody else going like it does me, but we're just going to keep going.